The Israeli Ministry of the Interior has corrected the data on the Jewishness of immigrants to Israel in the last 8 years, and clarifies that most immigrants from the former Soviet Union are not recognized as Jews, while most immigrants from the US and France are Jews. 61.5% of immigrants from Russia and 66% from Ukraine are not Jews, while 96% of immigrants from France and 95% of immigrants from the United States are Jews. Among all immigrants, it was found that 37.5% were not Jews. The data that the authority is now publishing is on the Judaism of the immigrants today. After some of them underwent procedures such as conversion, and in the meantime it refuses to reveal what their status was at the time of immigration. A more accurate data segmentation shows that Russia has received the highest number of immigrants in the last 8 years, 56,342 immigrants, of whom 21,383 are Jews, and 34,662 are not. The remaining 279 are not yet registered. 39,740 people immigrated to Israel from Ukraine, of whom 13,235 were Jews and 26,256 were not. The remaining 249 are not yet registered. France, on the other hand, registers an absolute majority of Jewish immigrants. Out of 30,361 immigrants, 28,967 Jews while 1,168 are not. The remaining 226 are not yet registered. In the United States, the ratio is similar, 19,721 immigrants, of whom an absolute majority, 18,608, are Jews, and 915 are non-Jews. The remaining 198 are not yet registered. Official data provided by the State Population and Immigration Authority of Israel, following a request by the Hadush Association, according to which 86% of immigrants to Israel in the past 9 years are not recognized by the state as Jews. Official data from the Ministry of the Interior revealed that only 14% of those who have received Israeli citizenship in recent years under the law of return are themselves members of the Jewish people, while 86% are non-religious or other religious people who immigrated to Israel as descendants or spouses of Jews. The Interior Ministry then retracted it, announcing that it would examine them again. Researcher on immigration, absorption.
Yitzhak Yosef, the avowed Israelis of Russian descent. Chief Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef made international headlines and headlines inside Israel after calling Russian Jews religion-hating goys. Now, goy is a word used for non-Jews, so as you can see, the situation is pretty tense.
חוק מיהו יהודי הוא חוק שגרם להרבה בעיות. לא יודע כמה, מאות אלפים או עשרות אלפים של גויים באו לארץ בגלל החוק הזה של חוק מיהו יהודי. כמה אנשים, כמה גויים שמצביעים כל מיני מפלגות אנטי-דתיות שהם גויים, הם לא יהודים. מאות אלפים, לא יודע בדיוק כמה המספר, לא בדקתי את זה.
Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef is the chief Sephardi of Israel. He is one of the 2 chief rabbis of Israel. The other is the Ashkenazi chief rabbi, David Lau. They make up the chief rabbinate of Israel. This authority is recognized by Israeli law as the supreme rabbinic authority for Judaism in Israel. Chief Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef, the influential rabbi of the Chief Rabbinate of Israel, made international headlines and headlines inside Israel after calling Russian Jews religion-hating goys. The Chief Rabbi of Israel doubts that Russian Jews are actually Jewish. He believes that they used Israel's law of return as an entry point to Israel. Israel's law of return confers the right to citizenship to any Jew. The Israeli law guarantees citizenship and safe haven to a spouse, child, or grandchild of a Jew, even one with little connection to organized Judaism. The comments brought out into public view the tensions between civil society and religious authorities that had long been kept hidden. Israel's chief rabbi's comments were political and came amidst a third election in the span of 1 year. Critics say that he was discouraging immigrants to vote, especially the Russian community in Israel, because their demographics may threaten the status quo. His comments also point to the tension in Israeli society between the different types of people there, in a hierarchy that started out with settlers who took over Palestinian lands since Israel's inception in 1940.
Doctor, introduce yourself, please.
Dr. Mordechai Kedar from Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies at Bar Ilan University, Israel.
Hello, welcome. Do Russians who immigrated Israel take advantage of the law of return?
Well, the whole question of Jews who came to this country during the last 30 years at least is very complicated. The definition of a Jew, according to the state, does not fit the definition of a Jew according to the halakha, to the Jewish religious law. The Jewish religious law views a Jew as a man, either a son of a Jewish mother or somebody who converted to Judaism according to the halakha, according to the Jewish law. The Germans, the Nazis, defined Jews, even those whose father is a Jewish and mother not, and even grandfather was Jewish, which according to the halakha, they are not. Because of this definition of the Nazis, we define Jews like them, means that we give the right of return to the land of Israel and to become an Israeli citizen to everyone in the world who is defined a Jew by the others because they hate the Jews. We love them. And this is why the state allowed many people from Russia and from other countries as well to come, even if they are not Jewish according to the halachic definition. It's enough if their father or grandfather or great-grandfather were Jewish to allow them to come here and to be a citizen. Now the question is, what happens with marriage? Because marriage within Jews, are they considered to be Jews or not? And here is the problem. The rabbinate here in Israel do not consider them as Jewish because they are not sons of Jewish mothers or did not convert according to the halakha. And this is actually the debate today. What should we take? The state definition or the rabbinate definition? And there is a problem in this issue, no doubt.
How have the Russian population impacted the growth of Israel settlements?
No doubt the Russian migration, which came since the Soviet Union collapsed in the end of the 80s into the 90s, gave a big boost to Israel on every indicator. First of all, the economy. The economy grew in those years, and they came like more than 1 million people within 3 years. The economy grew rapidly those days. The arts, many of them go to concerts, go to theater, and the arts, and many of them play instruments, and the arts in Israel flourished in those days, definitely. Many of them were engineers, doctors, And the engineering here in Israel, the high-tech industry, was boosted because of this blessed migration of, as we know, not all of them are Jewish, but they were became Israeli citizens. Many of them served in the army, and they served the country wholeheartedly. And they consider themselves Israelis. They speak Hebrew. They pay taxes. They behave normally like every Israel, and they consider themselves Israelis, although halachically they are not strictly Jewish. And this is I would say a civil absorption, in spite of the fact that they are not Jewish according to the halacha. And now we have the question: what can be done with them? Definitely, they are part of the Jewish population, and many of them also live in the so-called settlements in Judea and Samaria. Avigdor Lieberman, the leader or the politician who tries to represent this group, he himself lives in a place named Nokdim to the south from Bethlehem.
And this leads us to the third question: are all the Russians who immigrated to Israel Jewish?
Depends what do you mean by Jewish. If you follow the halachic definition, the religious definition, some of them are not. But if you follow the state definition, so they are definitely considered Jewish. And since they are part of the society, you cannot kick them out, and they are part of us in all the means.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are they observant of Judaic laws?
Many of them, those who are Jewish according to the halacha, many of them are religious. We, in our community here in Ra'anana, where I live, we have in the community some Jews who came from Russia or republics which belong to us, like Kazakhstan. Yes, definitely, they are. Many of them are very religious. Yes.
Okay. How have Russian Jewish leaders impacted Israel politics?
Well, the most prominent politician of the Russian or ex-Russian community is Avigdor Lieberman. He shaped this party named Israel Beitenu. Israel is our home, and this is the idea of this, the name of this party. And usually they tend to the right side of the political map. And the reason is very clear. In Russia, Russians have very problematic attitude to Muslims because of Chechnya and because of the Uzbeks and the others who have problems with Russians. And when they came here, they actually brought the attitude to Muslims from Russia to here. And the fact that most of the Russian Jews came from Russia, they politically, they tend to be in the right side of the political map.
What impacts have the Russian society made in Israel, and have those impacts been positive?
The economy was impacted by the Russian migration tremendously. The academic life, many of them engineers, many of them doctors, many of them entrepreneurs, and high-tech flourished. Actually, in the University of Ariel, there is a whole hothouse for researchers who do not teach, but they research and they develop all kinds of things in technology, in chemistry, in mechanisms, all kinds of things which they invent. And the University of Ariel actually have a good income because of patents which they register because of the inventions of those engineers who came from the ex-Soviet Union, and they settled usually in the city of Ariel.
They are smart. Okay, what about those who used the Israel passport to immigrate to the West from Russia?
Well, there is this phenomenon as well. People who came here, usually with their parents, old parents, lived here for a while, settled their parents in some kind of old age homes or things like this, and they continued their way to America, to Canada, and to other places. Yes, some percentage of them take advantage of the fact that they are Israeli citizens, and all of the gates on the world are open in front of their eyes, and yes, but they commute, they go there, they go in, and they are in a way or another part of the society here in Israel.
Question number 8, do the Russian Jews interact with the rest of society, or do they seem to marginalize themselves?
The generation which came from Russia, mainly because of the problems of language, because some of them do not acquire Hebrew with the years, depends on age and things like this, they tend to be isolated much more than their children. Their children went to the Israeli schools, they are in the public sphere, they serve in the army, they are much more integrated into the Israeli society. And they get married and they adopt the Israeli mindset and ways of behavior. And the biggest and the most, I would say, beautiful example is the rate of birth. The parents who came from Russia had one child, an average of one child per family. One child per family. These children, when they grew up here in Israel and they got married, they have average of 3 children. This is unprecedented in the whole world. There is not even one example in the whole world of a group of more than 1 million people. It's not 3 people, it's 1 million people, more or less, who have the rate of birth 3 times bigger within one generation. And the reason is one thing, optimism. Those who came were pessimistic. They came from the Soviet Union with all the problems which there were there, the economic problems and the other problems which were there. Here they come to a normal country, flourishing country, part of the West, and they were, okay, we are optimistic. And they see that the Zionist idea actually is successful, so they make children. And this is actually the criterion or the element which causes people to bring children to the world. If they are optimistic, they make children. If they are pessimistic, melancholic, they don't.
I think that Israelis agree with Chief Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef comments that hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of Gentiles, non-Jewish, came to Israel under the law of return. There are many non-Jewish here. Some of the communists hostile to religion, haters of religion.
Well, this is his view, and this is a democracy, and everyone can express his views freely. I don't agree with him, because hating religion is not restricted to people who came from the ex-Soviet Union. There are others who hate religion, just like there are those who love the religion. It is regardless of where you came from. Communists also. There were many communists here in this country before this blessed migration from the ex-Soviet Union came. So it's not connected to this community. Of course, you may find religion haters in every sector. So I definitely don't agree with this restricting of religion hating or communism only to this group of the Jews who came from the ex-Soviet Union.
Okay. What is the tension between Russian Jewish and other Jewish in Israel all about?
This is something which Israel lives with since 100 years ago, when different communities came to this country from different places in the world. Don't forget that these Jews lived in those countries for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. And they came with the culture of the countries which they came from. The Jew from Morocco behaves, dresses like his environment. In Morocco, the Jew in Hungary dresses and eats and dances to the music which he absorbed from his environment in Hungary. The same thing Jews in Russia, America, Afghanistan, South Africa, Argentina. You know, Jews came with different cultures. So when you put different people, or people who came from different cultures together, clashes and friction, which is not always positive, is inevitable. You cannot escape from this thing. Okay, they couldn't even speak to each other, because a Jew from Yemen speaks Arabic, a Jew from Russia speaks Russian, a Jew from Hungary speaks Hungarian, and so a Jew from the United States speaks English. How can they even communicate with each other? So this is one of the challenges of the Zionist movement, how to merge together groups of Jews who came in very short while from different countries. Ethiopia today, we have the same problem. People come with a different mindset because they were part of a society and a culture. But if you see the children of all those communities marrying each other, you cannot escape the conclusion that the Zionist organization, Zionist idea, succeeded not only to take Jews out of exile, it succeeded to take exile out of the Jews. Because the children, and especially the grandchildren of all those who came from different cultures, when they marry each other, they do not consider themselves anymore as Yemenites, Moroccans, Americans, Russians, Hungarians, and so forth. They consider themselves as Israelis. And this is the biggest success of the Zionist movement. Not only to take Jews out of exile, to take exile out of the Jews. And in this regard, the Russian community is part of this, because their children, let alone grandchildren, do not consider themselves anymore as Russians or others. And naturally, the friction which was in the first generation between different cultures actually vanished with the years, because the grandchildren do not have anything to fight for or to fight on, because the other guy is my Israeli brother or sister. And this is, I think, the miracle of the 20th century. This state is a living miracle of a nation which was dispersed to communities all over the world and succeeded to build a state and a nation. And when you compare it to our neighbors, the success of the Zionist organization is more than obvious. Only recently, a very prominent journalist in the Arab world, Faisal al-Qasem, actually tweeted and said that the Zionist idea actually is the only idea which succeeded in the 20th century here in the Middle East. And Faisal al-Qasem is not one or a Jew lover or Israel lover, but he cannot escape the fact that Israel is a story of success, while the countries around it are stories of failure.
It's true. Okay, last question. Can they sway the elections towards them? Can they sway the elections towards them?
Well, the ex-Soviet Union Jews are a significant number. And the Lieberman party, the Israel Beitenu, Israel Our Home, has around 9 or 8 Knesset members, and they might very possibly be the tipping point between the right represented by Netanyahu and the left represented by Gantz. They definitely can change the equation, and Lieberman definitely did it in the last 2 election campaigns when he didn't join neither of the sides, so they didn't have a coalition in the Knesset.
Welcome back. Who are the Russian Jews? How did they get to Israel? And what role did they play in the Israeli society? And finally, why is the topic of Russian Israelis so controversial these days? Let's find out.
Between 1989 and the mid-2000s, 1 million Russian Jews went to Israel to settle. Quickly, they realized that they weren't welcome. Due to their liberalism, they were exposed to slurs and slights from conservative rabbinic figures in Israel. The largest number of Russian Jews now live in Israel. Israel is a settlement to a core Russian Jewish population of 1,975,000 and an enlarged population of 1,200,000, according to the World Socialite website. Russian Jews account for more than 33% of the Israeli population. They have influenced the culture, high-tech industry, language, education, and perhaps most significantly, Israeli politics. Some came to pursue the Zionist dream, and a large number came for better economic prospects. Upon arrival, they overwhelmed Israel, causing a severe housing crisis. Many eventually settled in Russian enclaves in cities such as Ashdod, Petah Tikva, and Haifa. They didn't want to integrate, they wanted to lead, they changed the nature of Israel, according to Lily Galili, an Israeli journalist. Nowhere is this more apparent than in Israeli politics, particularly in the rise of Avigdor Lieberman, Israel's Moldova-born ex-war minister, and his center-right party, Yisrael Beitenu. Lieberman and his party have pursued a relentlessly right-wing agenda, opposing concessions in peace negotiations with Palestinians, supporting settlement expansion, seeking to curb the rights of Israel's 20% Arab population, and attacking leftist NGOs and campaigners. The Russian Jews are key population of the illegal settlements being expanded into occupied Palestinian lands. Their tensions with ultra-Orthodox Jews is visible in many parts of the society. They oppose the Orthodox-led rabbinate. Their votes in the midst of an electoral year appears to be the rabbinate's major concern. The Israeli rabbinate's budget depends on public funds apportioned to religious political parties under the controversial negotiations that establish coalition cabinets after each elections. The more votes, the better the budgets for the Chief Rabbinate of Israel, which traditionally controls curricula for Jewish education, certifies religious marriages, and supervises religious conversion among their myriad duties.
Mercury, the editor-in-chief of thedoran.com, joins us from London via Skype. Mr. Mercury, thank you for joining us. Now, I understand that you're an expert when it comes to the subject of Russia and Russian Israelis in particular. And you once said that Russian Jews in Israel have hostile views towards the region. Now, can you explain what you meant?
I think there is some truth to this, in the sense that Russian Jews, or people who've come from Russia to Israel, have a view of the Middle East as this place where they've come. They come from a very, very big country, and they're not very connected with the life of the Middle East. Many of them, to be frank, have very hostile views of non-Jewish people, and they are very, very unwilling to accept peace with people that they see as inferiors. I want to make it very clear, I'm not suggesting all Russians think like that, but if you look and listen to people like Nathan Sharansky, for example, the former Soviet dissident, and other people like Mr. Lieberman, the leader of the Jewish Russian community in Israel, they are very militant and very hawkish and are not generally in favor of peace.
And what role have Russian Jews played in Israeli politics and elections? Who do they usually back?
I think they absolutely can, and they have. Mr. Netanyahu, who is the current Prime Minister, still the Prime Minister, he has heavily depended in the past for parties which represent Russian Jews to act as his coalition partner so that he can maintain a coalition. And of course, Mr. Lieberman has often been a very prominent minister in his governments. In fact, Russian Jewish parties are increasingly holding the balance of power in the Knesset and are becoming important forces in Israeli politics. In terms of internal politics, they tend to be, as I say, a secularizing force. In terms of foreign policy, they tend to be a hardline, anti-peace, pro-Israeli expansion force. So they have these two sides to them, which makes them an important factor. They also tend to push, by the way.
Activist and spokesman for Neturei Karta, Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss, joins us via Skype from New York. Hello and welcome to the show, Rabbi. Now, those were some pretty harsh words according to the Russian community in Israel. Now, what was the chief Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef trying to say?
With all due respect, as a Jew has to be respectful to their leaders, and I'm the United States, and President Clinton was our president. We may just like to state that the Russians, a lot of them became their possibility. They were very idealistic, possibly, but there were many who were not also. So it's sort of a hard statement to swallow, because a lot of them, were just didn't. In other words, maybe President Clinton always, the political leaders always, I would say, meet up with other political leaders like Mr. Lieberman and so forth, and others who are, maybe representative of the Russians. And these guys are the big problem, not the laymen. So I think that a lot of it has to do with the perception of their political leaders.
Now, some of the Russian Jews in Israel came out and said that they've never been an obstacle to peace with Palestinians. What can you say about this?
First of all, I should have prefaced this whole interview with stating, I pray to the Almighty that He should bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, and that I may be worthy of conveying His message. And of course, my name is Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss of Neturei Karta. We represent the voice of Jews who are true to the religion, worldwide, regardless where we live, and we have connections. Of course, we are in close contact with our brethren, brothers and sisters in occupied Palestine. That said, and the Torah, of course, forbids us to have our own state, our own sovereignty since the destruction of the temple, and we're forbidden to kill or steal. So the whole state of Israel is unacceptable, illegal according to the Torah. That's first of all. And I talk in constant contact with my brethren in Palestine, so they tell me, a lot of times, who are the ones who are standing up, in the way of peace a lot of times. And it's hard to say that the Russian are an obstacle to peace. Again, there is of them, like I say, that have been gullible, that have fallen into the trap of Zionism. But there are many who are just simply, unfortunately, from the non-religious, they just want to live, their life in peace. And there's many, and then there's the religious, or many who are just anti-Zionists altogether.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the Israeli regime is forcing Russian Jews to expand into Israeli settlements on occupied Palestinian lands. Can you please elaborate on this?
Again, they always try to use for their benefit everybody who's coming. They don't mean Judaism, because if they mean Judaism, the state of Israel would not have been created, and they wouldn't be busy brutally beating the religious Jews who are living in Palestine, as they continually do. As you see, always we show pictures of how they brutally beat and attack the Jewish societies who are true to Judaism. So they don't mean the benefit or the welfare of the Jewish communities over there. What they do mean is to build up their state of Israel, this political nationalist state of Israel. That's what Zionism is all about. So they obviously have tried at the beginning, to push these Russians to the settlements. But we do understand that it's really not an issue. It's not the Russians who are, except for exceptions. But they're basically, it has nothing. It's not the Russians who are in the expansion issue as a generality. They are just not part of that, although the Israeli again tried at the beginning, but that's not what they're being used for.
Well, thank you for that, Rabbi. That was Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss from New York. Now, Israel has this law known as the Israeli Law of Return. Now, what it does is that it allows for all those claiming a Jewish background to immigrate to Israel. Some, like the Israeli chief rabbi, claim that the law is being taken advantage of by those who seek Israel's passport in order to flee to the US and other Western countries. Now, on the streets of northern city of Haifa, we asked Israelis a few questions. We started out with this one. Do you think that the so-called law of return is being taken advantage of?
כל פעם שמדברים, לא משנה, על רוסים בנפרד, אתיופים, לא יודעת, כל מוצא שאנחנו פה ישראלים סך הכל. אז כמובן זה מאוד מעליב, פוגע, ואין לי מה לומר, אני פשוט לא מבינה איך בן אדם שהוא תופס נישה מאשר לעצמו.
אוקיי, אז קודם כל אני חושבת שדבר שיכול לגרום לבלגן ולעוול זה שאנשים שהם גדולים, אנשים שהם מוכרים, יוצאים בהצהרות גזעניות נגד איזשהו תחום, אם זה להט"בים, אם זה רוסים, כל ההצהרות האלה הגדולות שאת שומעת בתקשורת, זה חושב ככה על הלהט"ב, זה כל כך מביא סכסוך, ובמקום לעשות שלום ואחדות, אנחנו רק גורמים לפרק את העם שלנו ולא לעשות טוב.
הבעיה היא בעיקר איך שמציגים את זה. העניין הוא ההגדרה של מה זה יהודי זה הגדרה שמופיעה בהלכה היהודית. והכוונה היא לא לדבר נגד מישהו שהוא חי הרבה שנים בין גויים ושינה את המנהגים שלו, אבל יש הלכה שהיא אומרת דברים מסוימים וראוי וחשוב להתחשב בה, בלי כוונה לפגוע בבן אדם כזה או אחר. מישהו התחתן עם אישה גויה, אז הילדים שלו הם לא יהודים, זה מה שההלכה אומרת, ואין פה כוונה לפגוע באף אחד.
הולך לטובתם שגם אם הם בחרו לעבור לארצות אחרות, יכולים גם להביא משם עוד יהודים, לקבץ אותם בארץ, וגם לדעת שוב שיש להם את המקום שלהם, שזה הארץ שלהם, יכולים תמיד לחזור.